This show showed us the good people that are in government in Iowa, especially at the local level. And that is what gives me hope. We need people who are going to continue to step up and continue to give of themselves and be able to provide some of these benefits to the people that live in the places that we love. Iowa is absolutely filled with great people. When people speak to those of us that are elected to represent them, we have to listen, and that's how we make really good decisions.
Welcome to another edition of Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. But today, a slightly different show. I'm going to host this all by myself because my usual co-host, Brad Cavanagh, is today's guest. So, welcome, guest Cavanagh.
It's good to be here, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. How have you been?
I'm just doing great.
All right. Yeah. Listen, we're doing this because this is the last episode of the season, of the first season of Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. Hopefully, we'll be doing this for many years to come. But I wanted to get your perspective on your year. You're wrapping up your year as president of the Iowa League of Cities. You're still mayor of Dubuque. So give us some hope. We have, it's a rough time in American politics. You're mayor. You've looked at what's going on in Iowa. Give us some hope that there is good government and good people in government. And what's your big takeaway from the last year?
I think my big takeaway is that this show did exactly that. This show showed us the good people that are in government in Iowa, especially at the local level. And that is what gives me hope. I mean, honestly, Dave, it was funny. I had a meeting the other day. It was somebody and my question to them was, well, if you were the mayor, what would you do? And their first answer, without even hesitating, was quit. That was their first answer.
You're not quitting.
It was a joke, but yet I run into a lot of people who say things like, oh, I'm glad you're doing this because I'd never want to do it. I mean, it'd be crazy to be a mayor or be on council or things like that. We need good leadership in cities across this state and every state in America. And we need people who are going to continue to step up and continue to give of themselves and be able to provide some of these benefits to the people that live in the places that we love. We got to talk to people like that throughout this entire season. I loved that about this show. Every time we had one of these interviews, I walked away thinking, okay, all right, we're doing okay. We're doing just fine.
I feel better.
Yeah, I feel better because you can get so bogged down just reading the international news and the national news and at times the state news for us in Iowa. But when you think about things going on that are exciting and good in each of these places, you in Iowa, you get this sense of hope and optimism that I hope everybody else was able to pull from listening to this too.
So you were you're mayor of Dubuque, but you're president of the League of Cities. What's the one thing that in your term you feel like you accomplished as league president?
It kind of fits with what I just said because when I first took this role and started to, and at the conference last year in Sioux City, I gave a speech that I very much intended to say the message that I just delivered, in that we need to have hope and we can have hope about what is going on in our state. The people that are in this room, the ones that were all there at the annual conference, are the people who run the day-to-day operations of our entire state all together. And we don't care what party we are. We don't care, what our background is necessarily. We just want to get stuff done and make sure that we leave a better place than what we found it for the residents who live in these cities. And what I'm hoping, as I close out this year and we go to the annual conference coming up here, I'm hoping that people have felt that sense of optimism because I think it's real and I'm genuinely delivering it. I'm not saying it just for lip service. I think we should have hope about our state. We should feel good about the direction that we can point it all together if we're working together in this way.
When you traveled around Iowa for the past year and you have, these conferences you go to and the meetings and the other city officials you meet, the mayors and the city administrators, when the conference is over, they sort of pull you to the side and go, hey, Brad, come here, I got to talk to you. What are they saying to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest concern that I think local leaders have right now is this, there's a general sense of animosity between local government and the levels of government above us. So local government and state government in particular in Iowa, but then also federal government, and What local governments need is all levels of government working together. We have a very finite amount of money. When you think about it, we have a very finite number of resources. We have a smaller group of people to work with than a state has or an entire country has.
Sure.
And part of the challenge is that we can't do it alone. We have to have that help. We have to have people who are going to be there working with us and other elected officials working with us. I think the number one concern that I hear from other elected and appointed officials working at the city level is this concern about feeling at times under attack, feeling like we don't have partners, but instead we have adversaries. And my encouragement to them throughout this year, and actually, before this, and it's going to keep on happening, is no matter what that animosity feels like, no matter how real it is or how it might be sometimes in our head, I think we have to get to know the other people who are serving in other levels of government as people. We have to form real relationships with them. We need to get to know as much as we can our governor and her staff. We need to get to know our legislators and our senators and our representatives in Washington, D.C. We have to do that on the ground, face-to-face work, because without it, then it really is only about what people are shouting about on social media and in the media in general.
So we talked to a lot of people, 11 different people, more actually, if you count some of the folks that just answered a quick question about what good government was over the last year. And many times I said, Brad, are you taking notes?
Yes, you did.
Are you taking notes? Are you getting this?
I forgot to write them all down. I didn't bring them with me.
Are you getting this? Are you getting this? Are you getting this down? What have you taken? I mean, your primary job is mayor of Dubuque, and I'm sure the people of Dubuque are in some ways happy to have you traveling around to Washington and traveling around the state on their behalf. But on the other hand, I'm sure there's a segment of people who are saying, like, wait a minute, you should be here home. What have you brought back to Dubuque from your year as president of the Iowa League and as, you travel and talk to folks?
Oh boy, that's a huge question. It's very broad. There are so many things.
It's a podcast. We have time, but let's try to limit it to some high points.
Sort of, yeah. I think it's a number of things really. It's not any one like project or specific practice or anything like that. It's more about oftentimes there's a recognition when you go to another city and you look at what the city leadership is doing there and how they're going about solving a problem, and you think to yourself, okay, we've got a very similar problem. Is that something that we can do in that way, or have we already done it? Or maybe we did it a little bit differently and I could share that information with them. I think one of the things that I get from the biggest lessons that I pull from talking to all of these leaders is just how many different ways there are to solve a problem that you might run into and how common some of these problems are, like infrastructure. Everybody always talks about infrastructure, all these different things, but between roads and then the stuff that's below the street, all those problems are very, very common problems throughout cities. And I think sometimes it's easy for your community to, it's kind of a saying, like when you're standing up against a wall, right up next to it, all you can see is the wall.
Right.
And if you back up, you can finally see the bigger picture. That's kind of what it's like when you're working in the trenches all the time in your own city. To be able to go out and see how other people are solving those problems, I think is the biggest takeaway. It's why we, in the city of Dubuque, we really care deeply about making sure that our staff, especially our leaders, like the department heads and our city manager and assistant city manager, are able to go out and go to conferences and see other things that are going on. And then same goes for me and council members. And I think that that's one of the biggest benefits of being a member of the Iowa League of Cities is your ability to talk to other leaders that are in a similar boat and figuring out how are they doing it? What are they solving?
We've had 11 guests. One of the guests that really, really, truly impressed me early on was Becca Bixler. She's the mayor of the very small city of Inwood. And what I loved about her was that she was young. I'm going to throw her a bone and say I think mid to late 30s, if I'm correct.
Fair.
Becca, if I got it wrong, I'm sorry. But she said, we need a walking trail in our town. And she walked in and said, how do you get a walking trail? And they said, well, you have to do a bunch of things. And she said, well, how do you get those done? And she said, well, you have to appeal to city council. And she walked in looking for, I believe it was a walking trail. And she walked out with a petition to run for city council. She ran, she won, she became mayor. I was impressed with her. We had her on the show. I know you were too.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from that?
I think my biggest takeaway in talking to Becca was just, I don't think people realize just how many great leaders exist just even in one state in the country,
Yeah.
And you've got a tiny little town of 900 people in the far northwest corner of Iowa. And here you find somebody with that level of energy and that level of dedication and this, not only the ability to connect well with her neighbors and the people around her, but the true, genuine desire to do so. That's what good leadership is built from. And I think that to see that in action in the stories that she described, just the way that, because I think we all have this idea of what small town living is, right? And in Iowa, it's different a little bit than probably is in New York and other places. But, I think it's real connection with people. Those small towns, especially in our state, that real connection has to happen because it's a no BS kind of environment. People are going to see right through any level of bull, and the ability to be able to make that connection and really, genuinely care about people, I think are some of those great qualities that I pulled from that interview with Becca.
What other interviews or conversations that we had stand out?
I love the fact that we were able to talk to both, mayors and council members, and we had city clerk on here. We've had city managers on here. I think I like hearing from all those different perspectives because they do look at things differently. They do come at the challenges a little bit differently. I always enjoy talking to Travis Gedkin from Decorah because, Decorah is a unique place in Northeast Iowa. It's got a lot of unique things going on for it. It's got a small college there, still a pretty small town, but, definitely mid-sized. Has things like a major international brewery there in Toppling Goliath. There's these cool things that happen in Decorah and everybody kind of hears about that. But to be able to hear that from Travis's perspective and then also
and let's remind everyone, this is a big personality. This is a big guy with a big personality.
Yeah.
He stands out in the room.
Knows. Yes. Yeah. But he also talked about, it's the same kind of small town sensibility where his favorite thing to do in Decorah was to have, a driveway, a fire in the driveway, like a campfire right in the driveway with his neighborhood to be able to hang out with his neighbors, and that's the kind of stuff that I love the fact that at the local level, that is so very real. We think oftentimes of politicians and quote unquote bureaucrats, and we think of these people who never leave a desk, never leave their ivory tower, and here you got somebody like Travis, who's the city manager. He's running the whole city and he's just hanging out in the driveway with his neighbors, just like everybody else. And I think those things stick out to me, those very human relationships that people described. We heard that a lot in this show.
How important was it for you to have conversations with city managers and city administrators beyond your own? And did it help you become a better mayor in your city?
Absolutely. I think personally and selfishly, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about being both the president of the league here this year and then also co-hosting this show with you is the ability to take some of these things back and talk to my own city manager. I think I've said a couple times, our city manager here has been city manager for 30 years. So that's.
And how often does he say, Mr. Mayor, let's just have a chat about that before we go crazy here?
You're right. Yeah, there were those moments.
I'm sure.
Year, for sure. Mike and I had those discussions. And I think, but it does help me to be able to come. And I think Mike, my city manager, appreciates that, to be able to come with a different perspective and say, hey, I just heard about this. I just learned about this.
What was interesting for me is, everybody knows who the mayor is. Everybody knows who the mayor of the city is or the mayor of their town. I think more than a few mayors have said to me, we are responsible for, we have no authority to do anything and we're responsible for everything. Yeah. Is that a fair assumption is that
I don't know
fair
about
interpretation of being
anything,
mayor?
But our authority is more limited than maybe some mayors would like.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you talk to city managers, and they're the ones who actually do the work. Every day. Yeah. They're up there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, weekend events. And that's got to be a great perspective for you to be able to talk to different people around the state.
It is. And, and it actually makes me think of another episode we did with Shelby Hagan, who, we talked to her.
Sure.
I think we recorded that episode at the conference last year.
Yes, we did.
And she's a city clerk, and she, it's so interesting because Shelby is highly respected across this state. And this year, in fact, after you and I did that show with her, during our legislative session, Shelby and several others, I saw them at the Capitol in Des Moines advocating for a very specific bill that the Iowa League of Cities was really working to be able to push. And Shelby did a great job with that. And I think it's important for people to recognize that, it's the city clerks too the city clerk is the only truly required position in any city in Iowa. You have to have a city clerk. You don't have to have anybody else. And that, they're doing, you want to talk about day-to-day operations. That's definitely one of those things. So I was glad we were able to talk about that perspective too.
One of the things that I was really happy about is you introduced me to Quentin Hart, who's the mayor of Waterloo. And wow, this guy has changed the city.
Yeah, Quentin. Yeah, everybody knows Quentin's story, and Quentin's well known across this state and has done a great job in Waterloo. And I've really appreciated getting to know Quentin and people like him who have been in these roles for a very long time. Being able to really see the benefits of just continuing to sort of grind it out in that role and be able to make those changes that you need to make, be able to build onto your downtown, be able to do the hard work with, things like public safety and all the things that Quentin has had to do. It's just a great example of what it means when you really stick to it in this leadership role.
You took over as president of the Iowa League of Cities from Ashley Norney of Cedar Rapids. She was a city councilwoman. What did she tell you right before you took the job?
Yeah, so it's Ashley Van Orney.
Sorry.
Van Orney. That's okay. Yeah. And right before I took the job, Ashley was great at helping me along all last year too. Just kind of getting me on board to be able to say, these are some of the things that I've seen in these last few years, because she had been on the board with the Iowa League for a few years before me. So she had some I always call it institutional knowledge, that perspective that people have when they've been able to experience things for a little bit. And, Ashley herself is a young leader. She's younger than me and, really absolutely tons of energy in this role. And then also at the national level. So I think one of the things that Ashley really has encouraged, and she continues to encourage the entire league board and league membership to do, is to get as involved as you possibly can, and not just at the state level. One of the things that we need to be able to do as an Iowa League is to really start to match some of our neighbors in the involvement in the National League of Cities. Wisconsin has great involvement. Minnesota has really great involvement. And we have an event with them every single year that we get together for the National League of Cities conference. And I think if there's anything that we can do together as an Iowa League across the state, is start to push for more involvement at that national level, because it does matter for our state. It actually, we have more of a voice when we show up more often at the national level. And I'd like to continue to help our next leaders to be able to see that too, and push for that in our membership.
Alan Kemp is the executive director of the Iowa League of Cities. He was our last guest. How was he as a partner? How was he as I guess a mentor a little bit, and as a sort of steady hand on the wheel every day?
Yeah. Alan is a great partner. One of the things I've enjoyed most about this role, just even being on the board for these last few years, is getting to know Alan more and getting to know the staff that he leads more. We have some really great people working at the Iowa League of Cities, and Alan is one of them. He's been dedicated to this role for many years. He's he's well respected nationally. One of the things I got to do with Alan is he and I went to Washington, D.C. for just a real quick whirlwind trip for the fly-in for just the league state presidents. So the presidents and the executive directors go together, and we were able to do that for a few days. And I got to see him interact with some other league executive directors across the country. And he's very well respected. He's very plugged into what's going on in the National League. And I think that perspective has been very helpful. You mentioned at the top of the show, this is a tough time for cities, and Iowa is no exception. And I think Alan has done a very good job of leading us through some of these difficult situations that we're in. So
before we get into our questionnaire, anything else stand out in your mind from the last year of shows?
Boy, we've said quite a bit of it.
Yes, we have.
The one thing that we haven't talked about is you. And I just want to make sure that I mention this because, I've been thinking about this a lot, Dave, like just such a chance encounter that you and I had.
Yes.
I remember we were actually introduced by a woman that I see at all the U.S. Conference of Mayors meetings who works for the EPA. She's sort of Arnita Hannon is her name. And she's actually she's sort of, this fixture with the EPA, and Dubuque has known her well for years and years. And
I try to meet everybody.
She kind of took me under under her wing and showed me around a little bit and introduced me to people. But at one evening, she introduced me to you, and I had seen you sitting at your desk, there at the top of the escalator.
Yes.
And I had no idea what you were doing and why you were sitting there interviewing everybody. But the fact that I woke up early in the morning to come and talk to you that next day,
yes,
and have a conversation, I'm so thankful for that, because it was from that opportunity that you and I got a chance to start to talk about this show and be able to do this. And I'm really glad that we've done this. And I want to thank you for it, because and not just thank you for being a part of the Leading Iowa podcast, but also for starting the Good Government Show in general. I think it's the right thing for this moment in this country. We need to talk about how government is doing good things in people's lives, because it is. And there is no argument in my mind that is occurring. But the fact that you're lifting it up, I think I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for that. The thing that I love when it happens is I'll meet people, and I'll, even not people in government, and I'll hand them my business card and say, well, just listen, the Good Government Show. And they look at it and they go, oh, good government. Yeah, there's no such thing. Come on. What are you, crazy? And I go, just listen to the show. And invariably they call back or email or text or whatever. And they go, hey, I listened to the show. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you surprised that I did a good job? Or are you surprised about good government? And they go, yeah, that was pretty cool. That was a cool project. So, hey, listen, we're winning over converts, hopefully one show at a time, and spreading the word of good government. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and getting to know Iowa. We've been playing around with, we had a little question that we asked everybody, what is good government in Iowa? And we got, I think, 24 people to answer that question. And there will be a season 2, folks, so just stay tuned for that. And we're going to change the question a little bit. But I'm going to ask you a question that I'm not asking everyone next year.
Oh boy.
Here we are in I in New York, you in Iowa, and you hear about Iowa, every 4 years. What would you like people to know about Iowa the other 3 years between presidential elections?
Yeah. The number one thing is Iowa is absolutely filled with great people. And I don't think that people get a chance to recognize what that means for making good government happen. I've talked a lot about how there's this sensibility in Iowa, and it's, you bring up the caucuses, and I think it's why the caucuses have worked so well and have been so important in political history in the United States, is because, if you're going to run for something here in this state, you better be ready to sit down and eat a donut or some sort of fried food at the state fair,
or a stuffing sandwich,
and or a turkey and dressing sandwich, which you're going to have here real soon.
Yes.
And you better be ready to have some real conversation and answer some real questions. I appreciate that so much. And I think people in the United States appreciate it too. I think you get a chance to see somebody who wants to be, so at the caucuses, somebody who wants to be the president of the United States, they have to sit down at a literal kitchen table and have a real conversation with somebody. It doesn't take long to see if somebody is a real, genuine person or not in that situation. And I think that's what people appreciate about things like the caucuses. And the great thing about it is, this is the answer to your question, is that's real in Iowa. That is real. I mean, I'm running for mayor right now, and you don't win if you're running for mayor unless you're ready to go door to door and talk to people about what they want to talk about. They are going to ask you real questions about their lives.
Have you been pulled into a few kitchen tables?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Even just yesterday, I was standing inside living rooms and having conversations with people, and it's about real stuff. And some of it is, very local. Some of it's, things that are, like I say, above my pay grade. But the concerns are real. And I think that what I want people to know about Iowa is, I don't know what mythology is in people's mind, but we're not all that different from, the realities of other people's lives in the rest of the country. But the one thing that is different is, there's an Iowa nice there, but we want to hear the truth from you. I mean, we want to put you on the spot and make sure that we have a real, actual conversation with you before we really make up our minds about things. And I appreciate that so much about this state. And and go back to my original part of this answer. I just every single day meet very good people who are just trying to live good lives and be good to each other. There's an idea in the country right now that we're at odds with one another. It's Democrat versus Republican, and we hate each other. That's this idea that's been put forth in in the media. And one of the things I love about my role, the things I'm so honored to be able to do, is talk to people for real and recognize that that's simply just not true in the way that it's portrayed. I talk to Republicans, I talk to Democrats, and what I hear from people are some of the same concerns about their lives. I hear some of the same things that they want to see for them and their kids and their grandkids. That's very, very real to me when you get a chance to actually have real conversations. So if I could encourage anybody to do anything, it's to, listen to this podcast, but shut off social media for a month and step away from some of the national major sources of news that you're getting and go out and have some conversations with your neighbors. And I think you're going to learn a lot more about each other than you might realize.
All right. So we're going to get to the Iowa questions, and I get to ask them all, and you have to answer them all this time. Are you ready?
Oh, man. Yeah, I didn't even think about this one. Okay,
yeah, well,
go for it.
That's why I'm the host. Yeah. So tell me what you found in the last year. What makes a true Iowa city?
A true Iowa city is a place that is built for the people who live there. One of the things that struck me is that every place there's some similarities. Everybody needs running water and flushing toilets and all that stuff. But there are the people in each of these different towns that we talk to want just a little bit different things. Like in Waukee, they're growing really, really fast. They need some services. They need some things. They need some entertainment options and that kind of stuff that people really want there because that's the way it's working. They're growing really fast. Waterloo is a city like we talked about that is it's got a long history. There have been a number of challenges along the way. Their issues and what they desire is just a little bit different than what Dubuque desires or Des Moines needs and that kind of thing. And I think a true Iowa city is a city that's built around the people who live there with their input. I think that's the most important thing that we talked about a lot in this show is that when people speak to those of us that are elected to represent them, we have to listen. And that's how we make really good decisions and how good government really is functioning because it is, the true Iowa city is a place that is built around the people who live in those individual cities. And I want to add one thing because this is something that is a concern from the state level. Every city needs to have the right and the freedom to build their own community in the way they see fit. And right now, I think there's a push, and it's coming, unfortunately, from our legislature, but then also other legislatures in the country to have a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to cities and telling cities what they should and shouldn't do. I think cities need to make their own decisions to do that because the people who live there are the ones asking for that.
What does good government look like in Iowa, and how is it different in Iowa than maybe other places?
I don't know if it is all that different than other places, but what I will say is that there are very, very good and capable leaders in this state who are stepping up to lead in their communities. And I would say that they are what good government looks like. And I think you see that all across the country. And I think we see it here too. We have a lot of people, you mentioned Becca Bixler in Inwood,
right,
who is, in a tiny little place. We talked to Nelson Crabb in Storm Lake, who's been mayor for 30 years. Is that right?
I think it was 20 years. Yes.
20 years. Okay. 20 years.
Nelson Crabb. 20 years in Clear Lake, Iowa as mayor. Yes.
Yeah. Somebody who has that like I said, institutional memory and the things of experience to go on when making decisions. We have a lot of capable leaders and they're doing some really good things. And I think that good government looks exactly like the people we talk to on this show.
So your year is over. Your year is about to be over as president of the Iowa League. What do you think is your proudest accomplishment?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that we've kept this sense of optimism with a show like this and the discussions I've had with other leaders throughout the state, in the executive board that we have for the league. My goal has been to consistently point people forward and not get stuck in the mud that is this constant feeling of fighting that we have to do, whether it's with our legislature or whether it's with, the challenges that we have, but to be optimistic and to keep pointing forward and be solution focused on things. I do think that I've spread that message. I do think it's held on in a lot of people's minds. And I do think that it's something that I'm proud of as I walk out of this role.
This is a tough question. This might be the hardest one of all.
Okay.
It's the last question. Usually you get to ask it. Today I am. Yeah. You're president of the Iowa League of Cities. So your focus is citywide, but you're also the mayor of Dubuque. What's your favorite place in Iowa? Good luck with that.
There's no way that I can say anything but Dubuque, Iowa.
Okay.
You know? I've told people, first of all, I love this state so much. I lived in Missouri for a while. I lived in St. Louis, It was great. I liked living in St. Louis. I went to school there for graduate school. My wife and I really enjoyed it. But I had a absolutely very real and very palpable feeling every time I crossed the Iowa border coming back from Missouri. I was just like, oh God, I'm so glad I didn't die in Missouri. There's something about this place. And I know a lot of Iowans feel this way too. It is so home that it's just in our bones. I feel it. And it has gotten more and more intense for every year that I've gotten older. And I just know that this place is home for me and I never want to leave it. And I feel that way very much about Dubuque. It's such a wonderful city. It's filled with so many wonderful people and it's just a feast for the eyes. I mean, it's just a beautiful place. And one of my favorite places in Dubuque is right down the street from my house at the top of the Fenelon Place elevator. And I'll take you on the Fenelon Place elevator. You're going to love it.
All right.
It's the shortest, steepest railway in North America and potentially in the world. And it's the way we get up and down the bluff if we don't want to walk. And when I stand at the top, you can see Illinois in one direction, Wisconsin in the other, and all of downtown. And I have so many great memories of standing there with my kids and going on this ride with my kids and just raising them in our house here. And every time I take a walk past there, I stop and I look out because it's just this most beautiful view of the Mississippi River. And I think it's probably one of my favorite places that I can think of.
All right. Well, I will be there. Congratulations. Yes. It's taken you a year, but I'm coming back to Iowa.
That's not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that.
I will see you in Des Moines at the League of Cities Conference, and I will, and then I'm traveling to Dubuque because I can't not come back to Iowa and go to Dubuque. So congratulations, you wore me down. Listen, it has been a pleasure. The past year, our first season of Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. I am looking forward to year two, and who we're going to talk to. And I guess we're going to start with the incoming president. So that'll be interesting. Watching you pass along what you learned to the next generation of leader. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for sitting in the hot seat yourself this time. So this is the final episode, episode number 12 of year number 1, season number 1 of Leading Iowa, Good Government Iowa Cities. As always, I'm Dave Martin, and with me, as always, my co-host, Brad Cavanagh. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us, and looking forward to year 2.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Talk to you soon. That's our show. Thanks for listening. Join us again right here for the next episode of Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. Make sure you like us and share us with your friends. Follow us on Facebook. Leading Iowa is a Valley Park production in association with the Iowa League of Cities. The show is executive produced by Katie Wheeler and Brad Cavanagh for the Iowa League of Cities. Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder are executive producers for Valley Park Productions. Our show is edited and produced by Jason Stershic.